Oh, no, not pink. Make it blue.
My studio guest today, Mrs. Thatcher, has been Prime Minister throughout the 1980s, a decade which saw immense social change here in Britain and which packed a huge punch on the international stage in its dying few months. For it was then, and with a stupefying suddenness, that the corrupt, time-serving communist regimes in Eastern Europe were swept away. None of it could have happened, or certainly not the way it did, without at least the tacit blessing of Moscow and another world leader of the decade, Mikhail Gorbachev. This year, then, is a time for establishing new ground rules, new systems and relationships. Right now, indeed, if timekeeping at the White House is as good as it is here at the BBC, Presidents Bush and Gorbachev are starting a news conference outlining what they've been able to contribute to these new relationships at their summit meeting this week. And the British government, too, will have a voice. Its best-known figure, the Prime Minister, is sitting opposite me. And later in the programme, there may be time for her to address some other international issues as well. But now let's move to the first question on East-West relationships. It comes from Hassan Sami, who's calling from Cairo, Egypt, and it concerns a united Germany. Mr. Sami, would you care to put your question to the Prime Minister?
Yes, well, Mrs. Thatcher, first I'd like to thank you for giving us this opportunity. And my question today will be around the German problem. Would you, as a Prime Minister of the UK, which is a member of the Allied forces who did win the Second World War, would you accept a neutral, united Germany in Europe, which is not a member of the NATO, or maybe only as a political member of it? And the second part of my question is, if the result of the summit, which is going on right now in Washington between President Gorbachev and President Bush, found to be that every side is insisting on his opinion, do you think it would be acceptable for both sides as a third solution for the problem, that Germany be covered by the French nuclear powers? And would you accept that as a Prime Minister of the UK and a member of the NATO?
Thank you very much, Mr. Sami. It's an opportunity for me, too, to answer your questions. First, no, Britain would not accept a neutral Germany as a satisfactory result of the difficulties which we're now experiencing. West Germany is a member of NATO, a very important member of NATO. East Germany also wishes, when she becomes unified, to become a member of NATO as a unified Germany, and we could not accept a neutral Germany. It's necessary to have Germany in NATO to continue Western security. The second part of your question, would we accept her as a kind of just political member and her troops not militarily integrated into NATO? The answer to that is no. It is vital to Western security to have a unified Germany within NATO fully militarily.
Mr. Sami, happy with that response?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Fine. In that case, we'll move on to Mr. Kenneth Holliday, who's calling from Tuscany in Italy. A question about the urgency of forming the East-West Alliance, or an East-West Alliance. Mr. Holliday.
Yes. Good afternoon, Prime Minister.
Good afternoon, Mr. Holliday.
It occurs to me, and the idea is so elementary, it must have occurred to many, that in view of the now changed world situation, an alliance should urgently be formed between the Soviet Union, Europe and the USA, to replace the belligerently tainted pacts of Warsaw and NATO. Such an alliance would take care for all time of the differences between Russia and the West, and not least of all, the Berlin-come-NATO question would immediately be solved. And think of how many years of so-called summit meetings could be avoided. Could not the Prime Minister, with her considerable influence, initiate such a history-making process?
Thank you very much. Normally, new alliances cause more summits, but that does not undermine your question. In a way, we already have such an alliance. You'll recall the Helsinki Agreements, which were signed in 1975 by 35 nations, including the United States, Canada, all the European nations, the Nordic, the Central European nations, and most nations of the Warsaw Pact, and of course the Soviet Union. That is the alliance which I think would meet your purpose. NATO will continue to be our defence alliance. The European Community will continue to be our main economic alliance. But you're quite right. We have to have an alliance where we talk across the old divides of Europe. And the Helsinki Accords, known as the CSCE, provides just such a forum. We hope, in fact, to have a meeting of that alliance later this year, provided there is an agreement reached about conventional weapons between the Warsaw Pact countries and NATO. So already that alliance exists, and we are using it fairly extensively, and I believe that it should be used even more extensively in the future, and that its foreign ministers should meet regularly. It's very good to have such a forum to talk things over.
Mr. Holliday, are you satisfied with that response from the Prime Minister?
Yes, I think he partly answers the question, but the fact remains we still do have these summit talks and these arguments over things like the Berlin question, and it would seem that the present agreements haven't taken care of that sort of thing.
Well, the Berlin question remains from the last war, where we have the four-power agreement on Berlin. We're trying to get a final settlement of that in time for the new conference of the Helsinki Accords nations that should be held by the end of this year. Most of us want all of the outstanding external questions relating to German unification settled before the end of the year, but in any case before that Helsinki Accord conference meets again. So there is a very special reason attached to Berlin. And then if by any chance either East Germany or the Berlin authorities still wanted some of our troops to remain in Berlin, say for a transitional period, that would not be under the old, leftover from wartime Berlin Agreement. It would be under a new agreement between the separate countries and the new unified Germany.
Clearly some considerable way to go on that particular issue yet. Time, though, now to move on. A question from right here in Britain, from Bromley in Kent, not all that far away. It comes from Mr. Joras, or perhaps I should be saying Joras, and it does concern an issue that is clearly a wedge in between East-West relations at the moment. Mr. Joras, your question, please.
Prime Minister, well, first of all, I would like to say thank you for seeing our Prime Minister while she was here in London, Mrs. Franskiene. Now, my question is this. While visiting Soviet Union this week, and during your talks with Mr. Gorbachev, will you bring up the subject of the inhuman blockade of Lithuania and Lithuanians' right to independence?
We shall, of course, talk about Lithuania. It would be inconceivable that we didn't when I'm talking to Mr. Gorbachev. Our position over Lithuania is that we have never recognized that Lithuania was legally a part of the Soviet Union. Obviously, you know its history because you sound as if you're Lithuanian. It was given by Hitler's Germany to Stalin's Soviet Union as part of that Friendship Pact, later as part of the Friendship Pact. We never recognized that legal gift. Consequently, our embassy in Moscow has never visited, none of its members have ever visited Lithuania because we didn't recognize it legally as part. But in fact, it has been part of the Soviet Union. Now you say, what do we do about that highly complex situation? Because you mustn't let the words or the strict legalities stop you from getting the real solution. And I see it like this. Mrs. Punskin and I had a very good talk. And she is very anxious to settle it, as are we, and she also knows the sensitivities on the Soviet Union side. So that's a very good thing. Lithuania has a right to self-determination. That is on the Lithuanian side. From the Moscow side, Mr. Gorbachev, President Gorbachev, has passed a law giving such states the right to secede. So neither side is saying that they can't go. One side is saying we have a right to self-determination, and the other side is saying you have a right to secede. So really what we've got to do is find a way of getting rid of the blockages and getting both sides talking about the practicalities. The practicalities will take quite a time, because having been de facto a part of the Soviet Union, there'll be many things to disentangle and many things to discuss, for example, about defense, because there's an outlet there to the Baltic. Those problems are soluble, and the good news is that both President Gorbachev and Lithuania are saying there is a right to secede. So let's get not too pessimistic or tied up in the technicalities. Let's concentrate on trying to find a way where each side understands the sensitivities of the other, and there are sensitivities, but gets down to the practicalities.
Can I just bring that briefly, Prime Minister, back to the studio? Do you think that Britain's voice in what is essentially an internal Soviet matter, though that not may be quite the way the Lithuanians see it, do you see the British voice, or indeed the French, or say the German voice, counting at all here?
Yes, I think it does count. I am asked about it quite often in the House of Commons, and what I say, I know, goes to the relevant embassies in each country. We all, as I mentioned, signed the Helsinki Accord. Part of that Helsinki Accord is that borders shall not be violated by force, but they may be changed by agreement. And so it is possible to change these borders by agreement. There's the extra complication with Lithuania and Estonia and Latvia about their history. Yes, I think we do have a voice. I think most European countries who were involved in that war have a voice, but we all have it through the Helsinki Accord, which we signed.
Thank you very much indeed for that answer, Mrs. Thatcher. Time now to move on again. A call here from Mr. Reinders, calling from Longiano in Italy, with a phrase that's become famous recently about Gorbimania. Mr. Reinders?
Yes. Good afternoon, Prime Minister.
Good afternoon.
Do you think this Gorbimania in the Western press has gone too far? And are you still impressed with Mr. Gorbachev? Because I think Western leaders should squeeze him a bit more, figuratively speaking, of course.
I don't like the phrase at all, Gorbimania. I just don't like it at all. I think that President Gorbachev has been is quite a remarkable president and a remarkable person. When you think that the greater part of this century, the old type of communism has held sway throughout the Soviet Union and also has had the objective of expanding throughout the world. And he had the courage and vision to say it isn't working. It gives people neither personal dignity nor liberty, nor does it bring prosperity. And all of the artificial things and statistics about standard of living and so on that have been put out are just not right. And the economy is crumbling, and so we've got to go to something else. And we're no longer trying to get this system throughout the world because it isn't a system that has any kind of future for ordinary people. I think that's a remarkable, courageous and visionary thing to do. It is much, much more difficult then to go from a whole economy which is operated on the basis that every single thing you do under instruction and take no initiative yourself, to turn round from that to the kind of economy where you take your own initiative, your own responsibility, make your own things and have to sell them. So I think that our praise of Mr. Gorbachev, now President Gorbachev, is fully merited. The other thing which has always impressed me right from the beginning when I met him, first, we were the first non-communist country that he visited. He was quite different from any other Russian or member of the Soviet Union I had ever met. Normally when you sit down to talk to them under the old communist system, in any communist country, they had a pile of papers on the table. No matter what question you asked, they'd read out a paragraph from this pile of papers, and you said, it doesn't answer my question, nevertheless you still got the same thing read out, and you couldn't really have a debate or argument or discuss things. So not so Mr. Gorbachev. Immediately he tackled the questions and could roam over the whole political spectrum. That was quite new. So I think the praise and the accolades that he is getting are fully deserved. And I think that without the change of view that he's taken, we couldn't be solving not only East-West problems now, but also problems like Namibia, Angola, Mozambique, Nicaragua, all of those things where previously the communists had been supporting different kinds of movements. So I am a great fan, yes, of President Gorbachev. He is very easy to discuss with, very tough in some ways, but then so am I. And I always enjoy a very detailed debate because, and I think it's been happening with President Bush this week, what they're doing is moving things forward, preparing for the next solution to the next problem.
Well, Mr. Reines, a very interesting first-hand insight there. Are you satisfied with that answer from Mrs. Thatcher?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Fine. Well, I'll give you, Mrs. Thatcher, just a very brief respite from all that talking, just to say that you're tuned to the BBC's World Service, and this is an international phone-in. I'm Oliver Scott, and my guest in the studio is Britain's Prime Minister, Mrs. Thatcher. If you'd like to put a question to her, and if you live outside the United Kingdom, the number to ring is the UK code, and then 7137974444. I'll repeat that, the UK code, then 7137974444. And if you live inside Britain, then the number to call is 07137900411. Time now to move on from a caller who isn't here in Britain. He is, in fact, in Budapest. His name is Duncan Shields, and it's a question about the European community. Mr. Shields, your question, please.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister.
Hello, Mr. Shields.
Hello. My question will be the following. With East Germany automatically co-opted into the EC through unification with West Germany, do you not see dangers in the position of the EC which is to continue to exclude the newly democratized Central European states such as Poland, Hungary and Czechoslovakia until after 1992?
Well, now, that's a real complicated question. First, the unification of Germany, which consists automatically of East Germany coming in to West Germany, but nevertheless the East German economy is a communist economy, highly subsidized, highly controlled, highly bureaucratized, and one that doesn't fit into the community at all. So there has to be quite a considerable transitional period before goods from that country can be accepted into the community on the same basis as goods from the rest of the community, because otherwise it wouldn't be fair to the rest of us who operate on the same competition rules. That will certainly bring us quite considerable problems, but the fundamental point is you can't have them in on the normal basis, but it has to be on a transitional basis until their economy has become much more like ours. Now, what then do we do about the East European countries that are becoming freer, much, much freer? Well, we've already started. First, we agreed as a community we should give some aid, and we're doing that. Secondly, for quite a long time, we have had trading agreements with those countries because quite a long time ago, we decided that we would try to increase contacts between East and West. We recognized at that time that they were part of the communist bloc, but we always wanted to try to start to end the divisions of Europe, and the way to do it was through trading agreements. So we've had those for a time, and now we're trying to get what's called an association agreement with each of them. Sometimes an association agreement gives hope that one day they'll come into the community. That's not necessary, but I personally do hope that one day the community will be very much larger than 12 members, and that some of those countries will become full members when they have our type of economy. In the meantime, perhaps they can join the Council of Europe when they've got full democracies. So we're already on to trying to deal with this and trying to overcome what has been that division of Europe. And I must say it's a joy that we're now able to discuss these things so freely and see them coming up to a freedom for which we fought, but which they have not known.
Mr. Shields, thank you very much indeed for calling in. As you may have noticed, we've been concentrating very largely so far in this programme on East-West affairs. Time now to move off in a rather different direction. The next caller is speaking from South Africa, which probably tells you something all by itself about the nature of the question. He's Mr. Mikhail Rosettenstein. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Beyond that, Mr. Rosettenstein, I'll let you speak for yourself.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister.
Good afternoon, Mr. Rosettenstein.
I was wondering what role you see for the British government in mediating within the South African situation. And secondly, what the aims of your proposed visit to South Africa would be.
Well, first, I don't think it's for us to mediate between the government, present government of South Africa and those with whom she will have to negotiate, the ANC and many other black South Africans. It's not for us to mediate. It is for the present government of South Africa and all of the rest of the representatives of both black South Africa and the Indians and the Cape Coloureds to come to their own conclusions. Anything that we can do to bring them together, of course, would be done, but even so, I think that is broadly for them. Our role has been a really rather different one, twofold. Along with the rest of the world, we have totally and utterly condemned apartheid. It is wrong. It is morally wrong. That is not in doubt. It has to go. That too is not in doubt. And President de Klerk, as you know, is moving fast on getting rid of some of the laws which belong to the old apartheid system. So first, like with the rest of our fellow nations, we have condemned it. But secondly, we know full well that you'll not get greater hopes for all of the people of South Africa unless you keep a prosperous economy going. Now, the fact is that the South African economy is the most prosperous in the whole of Africa south of the Sahara. Now, there have been people who wanted to put sanctions on it. Sanctions only work by causing vast unemployment and starvation, therefore, of people whom you're trying to help. If you're trying to bring up their standard of living, you must keep the economy going, and therefore we have been quite rigidly against comprehensive sanctions, and that now is at last being seen to have been right. And when the negotiations are complete, and there is a fully democratic government in South Africa, that government will inherit a prosperous economy. It will inherit the best economy in Africa. For that, I think, they perhaps won't say thank you, but we shall just have the satisfaction of knowing that we played quite a large part in helping that economy to survive.
Forceful exposition there, Mr. Rosettenstein. Have you the satisfaction of having your question answered?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're very kind.
Excellent. In that case, we now move on to Mr. de Sellis, who's calling from Brussels in Belgium. And it's, again, in a sense, an East-West question, although of a rather different nature, and it's about Tiananmen Square. Mr. de Sellis.
Yes, good afternoon, Prime Minister.
Good afternoon, Mr. de Sellis.
1 year after Tiananmen, do you have a message for the Chinese people?
A message for the Chinese people? Just let me think for a moment. My concerns are obviously very much with Hong Kong. We are responsible for Hong Kong, for the people of Hong Kong, until 1997. And we have reached an agreement with the government of China about the future of Hong Kong, which enables her capitalist economy of Hong Kong to continue for some 50 years. We have watched China, Tiananmen Square, with great anxiety. Before that, our hopes were rising because the Chinese government had been going about enlarging freedom in a different way from the Soviet government. Chinese government were enlarging economic freedom. They had, of course, a very different history, and many of their people had been used to growing their produce on their own land in the rural areas. And they were giving them much more economic freedom. They didn't have to sell everything through the communist outlets, but they could sell themselves. And so they were beginning to get the real marketplace kind of atmosphere that we know so well. And then from that, of course, they began to ask for greater political freedom. I know that the Chinese government is restoring more of the economic freedom and encouraging it. I believe that gradually you will find that more democracy will come to that country. I don't believe that China can be excluded somehow from the movement that is going on the world over, as people need to have their dignity and their self-esteem, and that will need to have some political expression. A better economy isn't enough. It will need to have some political expression. I think it will take quite a time, and I think it will have to be done in a different way from the way in which other people are doing it, because China is an enormous country and has her own history and culture. But I believe myself that gradually you will go to a more democratic system, and that obviously would be our wish. In the meantime, the economic freedom is beginning to work again and gives us a basis of hope, and also I believe that China will honor the commitments that she has made with us about the future of Hong Kong, because I think she will be wished to be seen to honor them in the forum of the world.
I think, Mrs. Thatcher, you began and indeed ended that answer just then with the topic of Hong Kong. I've got a feeling that our next caller, who is indeed speaking from there, is going to bring that topic right onto centre stage. Mr. Lasky.
Hello,
Good
Mr.
evening,
Lasky.
Prime Minister.
Good evening. It's evening there, yes.
Prime Minister, if you were negotiating the joint declaration for Hong Kong, now, 6 years on, would you consider any further or different terms, for example, democratic representation, or a specific term to allow for British right of abode, or an agreement that no soldiers of the Chinese Republic should be stationed in the urban areas of Kowloon or Hong Kong Island?
We spent a long time negotiating that agreement. It took several months to get it started. We had to do a lot of information to Chinese people who were negotiating with us about a free market economy and the kind of basic law that it requires. It was a very steady, informative negotiation, and I think that we were able to get a good deal for the people of Hong Kong, and I think they recognize that. It would not have been possible to negotiate what you ask with regard to the military. It is always, of course, possible for China to accede to that as an act of policy at the time. It is always also possible for China to say that people who have British passports who live in Hong Kong would have their British passports recognized, because that is normal agreement between sovereign states. I don't think that the difficulties will come from the agreement as such. I think if there are problems, it may come from the different stage of development with regard to democracy between China and Hong Kong. As you know, we had a long negotiation with China about how far we should go with regard to increasing democracy in Hong Kong, because our wish is to have a very smooth handover in 1997. And if we can get their agreement, and certainly we can go ahead without it because we are in charge administratively until 1997. We have taken the view that if we can always push a little bit further and a little bit further, as we have been doing, as they have accepted, then we might get a smooth handover in 1997. So I think we got the best agreement that we could. And I don't think it is that particular agreement that is holding anything up now. It may be that we differ on certain acts of policy, but then we go in and try to convince them of our view and what is best for Hong Kong. And what is best for Hong Kong is usually best for China, because we're very anxious that Hong Kong should keep her confidence and her prosperity.
Thank you very much indeed. And now we're halfway through the programme, still another 30 minutes to go. This is an international phone-in. You're tuned, of course, to the BBC's World Service. If you'd like to put a question to our studio guest, who's the Prime Minister, Mrs. Thatcher, and if you live outside the United Kingdom, do call us. The number to ring is the UK code, and then 713797444. I'll repeat that, the UK code, and then 713797444. If you live inside the United Kingdom, the number to call is 071 379 0411. And now we move on, in fact, to an area of the world which we've so far not considered at all. Quite a change of direction here, Mrs. Thatcher. The call comes from Mr. Alex Phillips, and he's speaking from The Hague in the Netherlands. Mr. Phillips, your question for Mrs. Thatcher, please.
Mr. Phillips, good afternoon, Prime Minister. Good afternoon. Now that the ideological divide between East and West appears to be fading and will perhaps be replaced by common sense, if you like, another ideological rift seems to be rapidly dividing the world once again. And I'm referring, of course, to the ever-increasing polarization between Western countries and Islamic countries, from the southern Soviet republics in India to the North African coast and the Atlantic. The epicenter lies in the Middle East, and its waves reach as far as Lockerbie or Mr. Rushdie. It seems that this polarization between rationale and doctrine is of great concern to both superpowers. Yet none of the views reaching us from Washington, or from Downing Street for that matter, suggest any concern with these developments. Could you tell us your government's position as regards the Middle East against the background of this polarization in a broader context?
It's a very deep question. May I tackle the Arab-Israeli divide at the moment? You're quite right. Whereas in the rest of the world, people of different views are managing to come together and talk with a view to settling their differences and seeing a way through which is right for both their peoples. That, alas, is not happening on the West Bank between the Jewish government and the Arab peoples. And it is a great sorrow that it is not, and it's made the more difficult by the fact that there is not an effective government in Israel to negotiate with. I know that both President Bush and the European community are very concerned about it. We are constantly trying new initiatives to get some talks going so that Israel can talk to some people who truly represent the Palestinian people. That does not necessarily mean members of the PLO, but who truly represent the Palestinian people. And we would like that to be against the background of an international conference, just as a background against that conference, not to get involved in detail, but so that it was the world saying, now is the time to settle those differences. I wish I could be more specific. It's a great sorrow that it has not yet gone further. With regard to the problems with Iraq-Iran, I hope that those will move forward. I think that it is important to get that full ceasefire. I also understand from things which there have been in the press this morning, although I have no further news, that Mr. Rafsanjani has held out a very significant olive branch to us. It would seem that Iran would like to have talks about perhaps restarting diplomatic relations. Any olive branch is very significant. I know that the Islamic people are always very concerned about anything which they regard as an insult to Islam, in exactly the same way as we are concerned when people insult Christianity. And we regard their insults as blasphemous. And I know that the same thing happens with the great religion of Islam. We can't stop freedom of speech. I think we would really, when we talk it through, come to a similar view. These are very great world religions. I'm a fervent Christian and others are fervent Muslim. These religions can easily survive the comment of a few people who receive great publicity because of their adverse comments about them. And I don't think that we should put too much stress on those adverse comments. The religions have been for many hundreds of years, and they will survive. And I hope that we will regard what has been said when I see it more full detail as a significant move, and I hope that it will lead through further talks to the restoration, or can lead, of diplomatic relations between Iran and our country. And I'm very pleased to hear people in other countries of the Middle East saying that it is really not acceptable to take hostages. It is uncivilized behavior, and the sooner we get all of those released, the better it will be, not only for those hostages who are never out of our thoughts and for their families, but for the world as a whole, that we're back to a code of civilized behavior.
Let me bring that back, if I may, to the studio for a moment. You've not said so in so many words, Mrs. Thatcher, but I rather got the impression from that last answer that you do think, or you do have some grounds for believing, that perhaps we are moving rather closer towards the release of all the hostages, including, of course, the British ones.
I never like to raise false hopes, but we have kept our ambassador in the Lebanon throughout all of the troubles with a very small staff, and he was very anxious to stay there. When I was getting concerned that was it right, and so as the Foreign Secretary, was it right to keep him there? Because it's just battle the whole time. He was very anxious to stay there with a small staff in case there's any news that he could possibly pick up by being there, or pick up or see to help the hostages. They have never been out of our minds. We've had sometimes false hopes raised many times, and therefore I'm very, very careful what I say. It looks as if we have a new significant olive branch put out to us. Anything that we can properly do, we have the greatest respect for Islam, the greatest possible respect. We cannot stop freedom of speech in our country. I know if they are concerned about what they consider blasphemy, many of us as Christians are concerned about it. But the thing is not to put too much emphasis on it. It's small compared with the enormous achievements of the great world religions. So we shall continue to do everything. I think it's Terry Waite, is it not his 51st birthday? I think the 4th that he's held in captivity, and there are others, and also we have other people too in Iran. We had, you know, it was we who were told to leave Iran. And we have been quite anxious to start talks once again to restore diplomatic relations. But obviously we cannot do anything which would hinder freedom of speech in this country.
And there we have to leave that topic. We're now moving on, a sea change really in topic now, because I'm about to introduce Francesca Dawson, who's speaking from Brescia in Italy, and the environment is now going to take a bow on the programme. Ms. Dawson, your question, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Prime Minister.
Ms. Dawson, hello.
Do you agree that the problems of global warming and of the degradation of the environment should be the most urgent items on the government agenda at present?
I think they are urgent. I think we have already begun to tackle them. You know the international conferences we've had on the ozone layer. Because you remember it was the British Antarctic Survey discovered that the hole in the ozone layer, and they have been monitoring it, and that hole we believed was caused by new chemicals which were discovered and which were acclaimed as a great discovery in the 1930s. And we have got an agreement that we're gradually going to phase out those chemicals, and we're doing a good deal of research on substitute chemicals. They're important chemicals because refrigeration relies on them heavily, dry cleaning and so on, but we don't need aerosols. We can find other ways of using the polishes and the cosmetics which have been put into aerosols. So we've already started on the ozone layer. We've just recently had a very effective report from the International Panel on Climate Change, which is a group of people under the chairmanship of Dr. Horton, who's head of our meteorological centre. They've come out with a report saying that the amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases that is going into the atmosphere is increasing very rapidly, is such that it cannot be ignored. They will not say precisely what the changes in climate that we have seen are due to, whether they are mainly due to natural causes, because we've had differences in climate before, but they do think we cannot ignore this enormous increase, which is coming first because we have a much greater population, kept alive by much more intensive agriculture, kept alive by much more intensive industry and use of fossil fuel. We cannot ignore this, and therefore we are going to, I hope, all of us, because it has to be done by all, agree to modify some of the things we do so that we cut down the extra which would otherwise go into that atmosphere and could cause very considerable problems to future generations.
Now, Prime Minister, I think that our next caller, your next caller, is probably going to press you a little bit further on that point. He's called Edward Lewis, and he's speaking from Qatar. Mr. Lewis.
Mr. Lewis,
good afternoon, Prime Minister.
You're in Qatar.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Thatcher.
Good afternoon.
There seems to be a consensus in many quarters that while you are better placed than other world leaders to appreciate the gravity of the environmental problems, your commitment in coping with them is insufficient. Too little, too late, some are saying. What would you say to that?
Well, first, they're not right, are they? It was our British Antarctic Survey which discovered the hole in the ozone layer. We had the second conference here, and a very successful conference it was. I think we have something like 35 nations of the world signed up to that convention. But I stress, as I stressed before to the previous inquiry, it has to be all nations. We are responsible in this country for about 3% of the accretion of gases on the greenhouse gases. Now, we shall not get anywhere unless we also persuade China and India to sign up to these things. But we are giving a lead, and we shall continue to do so. We believe that we can get the emissions of carbon dioxide, methane, and the other greenhouse gases down to where they will be, back down to where they are in 1990. By the year 2005, they'll go up before then they'll stabilize, and they'll come back down. Now, it's no good just writing your name, signing an agreement, if you don't think it can be realized. That, I believe, is what we can do, and therefore we have made our target clear. But I think the worst thing that can happen is a lot of talk, a lot of signing up, and then not honouring it. That is not our way. What we sign up to, we will in fact honour.
If I can just interject there, I mean, isn't really the point, Prime Minister, that whereas the case for global warming in the minds of many scientists is effectively conclusively proved, what the British government is talking about is action in 15 years' time, and only then to stabilise rather than reduce, for example, these carbon dioxide emissions. What people are looking for, isn't it, is action tomorrow. Haven't you any sympathy with that?
But there has to be action now, and will be, in order to reach the target in the year 2005. But some of the people who criticise, for example, I would only turn round and say to them, what are you suggesting, for example, that we should ditch all our coal miners and say we're not going to burn coal in power stations anymore, because it would be better if we burn gas? No, we can't do that. We can't do that. And so the new electricity companies have an agreement with the coal miners. And we are going to do with some of our power stations, take the sulfur dioxide out, as we agreed to, and then with one other we shall probably put in gas. But you've just got to have regard for your people. Now, certainly as far as France is concerned, she will have an easier task because 60 or 70% of her electricity comes from nuclear power. But, you know, some of the very people who are urging me to do more about it are the greatest opponents of nuclear power. The greatest opponents. Well, they've just got to come down from this ivory tower and get down to the practical arrangements. Now, that's what we are doing, and I've said what I believe we can do. And I believe we can hit that target about the year 2005. It will require pretty firm things, which we have to do. Other people say, right, just clap an enormous heavy tax extra on petrol. Believe you me, by the year 2005, I believe the cost of oil will have gone up enough without our adding to it. So they just have got to be realistic about this. And I believe we're realistic. I believe we've given a lead. We're in a position to honour the lead we have given, as we have on the ozone layer. We have marvellous scientists in this sphere. The Antarctic Survey, the Arctic Survey, the people at Cambridge are absolutely terrific. A marvellous meteorological office. It was our Dr. Horton who was in charge of this. Every single word of my speech last week, I agreed with him. to see that it was scientifically accurate. Now, we don't make agreements on hot air, but on solid science and what is practical and what is reasonable for our people.
Fine.
I feel strongly about it, and I trust I make myself clear.
Well, there on hot air, we're going to have to close the topic on this particular programme at any rate. Move on now, again, a new direction. Mr. Liam Dillon calling from one part of the United Kingdom with a question, I think, for Mrs. Thatcher about another part. Mr. Dillon.
Yes, Mr. Thatcher, good afternoon. It's obvious from the way you're responding to the questions that you would love to see an end to the disarray and dismay of human history so far. So may I ask this question? Do you expect that before you leave office, you will have left history the legacy of peace in Ireland, probably based on friendship and cooperation of London, Belfast and Dublin? Perhaps you and your secretary might be able to come to get this finally settled.
Mr. Dillon, peace in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, will not depend upon me alone or on this government. Every single citizen of Northern Ireland, be they of Republican background or of Unionist background, has the same democratic vote for the Westminster Parliament, has a similar democratic vote for district councils. The trouble is that there are some people who do not like the result of democracy and try to bomb and maim innocent people out of it by their wicked actions. We must be absolutely clear that both Northern Ireland, the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland, and the Republic of Ireland must leave no stone unturned to catch any such barbaric criminal and to bring him to justice in the courts of the land where that crime was committed. If we can get that, and if we can get everyone realizing that these people are not only wanting the unity of Ireland against the wishes of the majority of Northern Ireland, but they're out to destroy democracy and replace it with the rule of the gun, whether that gun or bombing be used on innocent babies, women, Australians, Americans, anyone in London at the time when they put it off. These people are wicked. And it requires all of us in Northern Ireland, the United Kingdom and other countries to make it perfectly clear that this is totally unacceptable and that the guilty must be brought to justice.
Mr. Dillon, you could hardly have got a more impassioned answer from the Prime Minister. Are you happy with that?
Yes, I'd just like to say that the Prime Minister is absolutely right, and I think the general feeling in Ireland would agree with it. But is it possible not to accentuate all the good things about the three places, the three cities and the peoples, and to give a little less oxygen, publicity oxygen, as she herself said so well, to the bad things? Is it possible to do that? And it might help publicly to change the world atmosphere to this problem in Ireland.
I agree with you. We should give much more publicity to the good things. And when I'm in Northern Ireland visiting, the country is more prosperous than it has ever been. Industry is going well, and there is a great deal for which we have to be thankful. But obviously, the men with the gun, and they'd be useless without guns and explosives. The men, it's only the strength of the gun and explosives who use their gun and explosives to tackle those who live by the rule of law and civil law. These men must be dealt with. And then we need the full cooperation of all the forces of authority in the Republic in order to do it, and we need the full condemnation of people everywhere. There are many, many people and young children who have been deprived of their fathers and of their family life by these people, and they are just uncivilized, the people who do these things, and they must not be acceptable in any society at all.
And from the Irish question, we move nimbly to the other end of the earth, and Mr. Luxton in New South Wales, to whom I imagine we should be saying good morning. Mr. Luxton, your question for the Prime Minister?
Yes, good morning, Mr.
Good morning. Oh, I've said good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. How are you, Mr. Luxton?
I'm fine, thank you very much. It's early in the morning, but my question relates to the Commonwealth, And I wondered if you would like to comment on what you see the effect on the Commonwealth of Britain becoming more and more part of the European Federation. And as an Australian, I'm especially interested in what you see the role of the monarchy as being for nations such as Australia, New Zealand and Canada, which share the monarchy with the United Kingdom.
Well, we're both very fortunate in that we are both a monarchy. I think it is quite the best constitutional arrangement that there can ever be. To have a monarchy is the focus of all the patriotism, affection and continuity, and have people like prime ministers to take the rap for everything that goes wrong. It really is a very, very good way of having the whole focus of a country on the affection and patriotism, and yet getting your elected representatives answerable. Now, you asked also about 1992 in the European Community. 1992, when we have a single market, that is to say goods and services can circulate freely and easily without subsidies throughout the community. We in Britain struggle and still struggle valiantly to make certain that this does not become an exclusive club. We are concerned that we get down barriers to trade inside the community as an example to the outside world, and not to put up barriers around the community. And so therefore now we and the United States and I think that the Commission are ardently negotiating in the Uruguay round over agriculture, because we know full well many of us subsidize our agriculture. The United States does, we do, Japan does, and that just isn't fair to the economies of the world who have to rely on agriculture for exports in order to get their living. And we want to start to get the subsidies down, and we're negotiating in the Uruguay round to do that. We also do not want so many regulations in Europe that it puts up the cost of our things that the next demand we get is a protective tariff barrier around it. We have always fought very hard in the community on negotiations for both Australia and New Zealand, particularly when it comes to the new agreements on lamb and butter with New Zealand, and we shall continue to do so. But you know, we don't want these new arrangements like the European Community to be new exclusive blocks inducing other exclusive blocks the world over. That would be a retrograde step. We want them to be a centre where we get the trade barriers down, and we negotiate and get more and more trade barriers down, so we enlarge world trade, which will be for the good of us all. But it's very good to have a question from someone in a Commonwealth country, and thank you very much.
Well, we've been going round the world as the minute hand has been going round the clock. It's coming back towards where it began, and so we, in the shape of the next question, which comes from Peter Dreesen in Victoria in Canada. Mr. Dreesen, Mrs. Thatcher's here to answer your question.
Yes, good morning, Mrs. Thatcher.
Hello, good morning, Mr. Dreesen.
This is indeed a wonderful opportunity for people around the world to speak to world leaders. My question is concerning economic reform in the Soviet Union. It appears in comparison to Mr. Gorbachev that Mr. Yeltsin wants to move more quickly, and on the other hand, the people of Belarusia and the Ukraine have voted against and don't wish to support the economic reforms of Mr. Gorbachev. So it appears as if Mr. Gorbachev is kind of caught in the middle. I wonder if there's a possibility of Mr. Gorbachev and Mr. Yeltsin working together to the benefit of the Soviet people.
I think in a country as big as the Soviet Union, you have need of a number of very, very intensive politicians, you know, strong personality, who can get together and go forward together, deciding how those economic reforms shall be brought about. I mean, the fact is, Mr. Dreesen, you cannot reform communism. You can only change it. You can't reform communism. You have to change it to a different system. And that is the difficulty. When the people, as in the Soviet Union, have had no experience of land ownership, of small business, of being able to do things on their own, to start up on their own, they have in fact to go and get permission to do everything. If you want a plumber, the state organization will send the plumber to you. Every single thing is the subject of bureaucracy or permission. No one has been able to start up a factory on their own, do their own thing, produce their own goods, and sell them across the Soviet Union. Now, I can understand why, in going from a totally centrally controlled, deeply bureaucratic economy to a free one, is causing problems, because people, with change, people are naturally fearful of change. They want to know where they're going, and they want to know what it's going to be like. Now, the great difficulty is they've had fixed prices for many, many years, and those fixed prices bear no relation to the cost of what they're producing. And really, you know, just have a look at it with regard to farming. If your prices are so low, then your farmers just don't grow the produce. So what you have is fixed prices, sometimes not sufficient to enable goods to be produced, and you really have to go to freeing prices. If you ask people, do you agree that prices shall be increased by 100, 200 or 300%, naturally they tend to say no, unless they say, well, now what else are we going to get for this? Are we going to get full democracy, as in Poland, or are we going to get something else? Now, he's right up against the boundary between the two economic systems, everything by central control, or far more by personal effort, initiative and responsibility in a society which has never known it. Don't underestimate the enormity of the task. These things can be solved given time and example, and if there is the spirit and the will to solve them. And I think you need quite a number of really powerful politicians. Never mind if you've got several powerful politicians, provided they work out their same objective and try to do their level best to implement it, having agreed, as they do, that communism doesn't work and that it's crumbling. The question is, how do you get to something that does work and brings the prosperity? It's not impossible. We have it. So does the United States. You're not at the leading edge of technology. You're only trying to do what has been done many times in the history of the world, but never quite going from this totally centrally controlled system to a free one. So it's a bit of history, but they'll do it.
You just said there, Mrs. Thatcher, not impossible. Nothing is impossible, or so might think Dita Yetuta-san, who's calling from London. She's a very young listener compared with almost everything that's gone before, and her question, Dita, is coming now for the Prime Minister?
Yes. Good afternoon, Prime
Minister.
Hello,
Dita.
Hello. Your Honourable Prime Minister, like the former Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, is a lady with strong potential, and your intelligence and personality is much more than the average. Being described by Russians as the Iron Lady, could you please tell me the secrets that are hidden in you that makes you much popular lady in the world?
Well, you're very kind and very complimentary. I knew Mrs. Gandhi and liked her very much, and I've known other women prime ministers too, like Golda Meir. I think we all had one thing in common. We decided what we thought it was right to do, and then we stuck to it. And we never did anything just for convenience, but we stuck to what we thought was right, and we tried to explain it, and we remained totally honest about it. I think that's the most important thing in politics. And I hope one day, Dita, that you might think of coming into politics, because you sound very interested.
Dita?
Yeah.
Are you happy with that?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dita.
Well, we've taken in quite a swathe of questions there from all around the world, ending there we were in London. And now we're about
That was a lovely thing to end on, wasn't it?
Yes, wasn't it marvellous?
Charming.
And now we're just about coming to the end of this international phone-in from the BBC's World Service here in London. My studio guest has been the Prime Minister, Mrs. Thatcher, and we'll be on the air at the same time next week. But meanwhile, thank you very much to all callers and to you, Prime Minister.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you very much.